Originali.
Lingue originali. Siamo arrivati agli ultimi 2 episodi dell'edizione dedicata alla letteratura in lingua inglese. Sempre su Caffè Italia, tra poco con la voce di Marco Piovaz, che ringrazio fin d'ora per la passione e la dedizione che ha dedicato a queste 2 stagioni di lingue originali, con Dario Albertini che vi parla e che vi ringrazia per essere ancora qui. Vi ricordo che sul podcast e sul canale YouTube trovate, tanto per l'edizione dedicata alla letteratura in lingua inglese quanto quella per la letteratura in lingua tedesca o francese, tutti gli episodi sul podcast e sul canale YouTube. Come andiamo a chiudere questa stagione? Lo facciamo con una vostra richiesta. Lingue originali, per quanto riguarda la lingua, la letteratura inglese, è nata con Alan Bennett e in particolare proponendovi degli estratti dalla sua raccolta di monologhi dal titolo Talking Heads. Ne trovate tanto nella prima stagione di Lingue Originali quanto agli inizi di questa che va a concludersi. Ricordiamo brevemente di cosa si tratta, cos'è Talking Heads. Talking Heads è una raccolta di monologhi che Alan Bennett scrisse per la televisione. O meglio, lui li ha scritti per ispirazione e per il piacere di scriverli, ma già pensando che vi potesse essere una trasposizione televisiva. E così fu, perché la BBC portò sul piccolo schermo degli inglesi l'intera raccolta, anche per radio, non solo in televisione, ed è diventato veramente un caso di comunicazione e, come vogliamo dire, di fiction. A Lady of Letters è uno dei monologhi che vi abbiamo proposto, ma per queste ultime 2 puntate andiamo a proporvi 2 estratti che inizialmente non sono stati letti dal nostro Marco Piovaz. Qual è la storia e chi ne è protagonista? Chi è questa Lady of Letters e cosa significa Lady of Letters? Andando con ordine, la nostra protagonista si chiama Irene Raddock, o se preferite Irene Raddock. È una signora sola, non ha una relazione sentimentale, non è sposata, è di mezza età e vive nei pressi di Bradford. È una signora che ama parlare, soprattutto scrivere. È sicuramente una rompiscatole, perché lei contesta tutto. Lei contesta tutti quelli che ritiene essere mali sociali, diciamo meglio, che di qualsiasi cosa lei proprio non possa non tener conto, di qualsiasi cosa lei dà fastidio, lei scrive al suo politico di riferimento, scrive alla polizia, scrive alla farmacista, scrive a tutti quelli che può. Irene Raddock è una donna sospettosa, vede il male anche dove non c'è. Potremmo dire che è un po' pettegola, no? Guarda fuori dalla finestra, nota qualcosa che non rientra nei suoi canoni e lei scrive e immagina che dietro quel qualcosa ci sia qualcosa di sordido, torbido, peccaminoso, socialmente pericoloso. È quello che succede nei confronti di una coppia che abita nei pressi di casa sua, sono dei vicini di casa, che lei sospetta maltrattare il figlio. Sarà così? Non sarà così? Ma diciamo, lo scopo di questa introduzione non è svelarvi la storia, ma incuriosirvi. Allora, 2 estratti. Il primo lo ascoltiamo subito dalla voce di Marco Piovaz.
Ladies of Letters, the early works of Vera Small and Irene Spencer, forwarded by Sue Townsend. Forward. Knowing my interest in collecting historical documents, my friends Lou Wakefield and Carol Heyman passed me a bundle of letters after finding them in the drawer of a melamine bedside cabinet which was being offered for sale at a car boot sale in Walmer, Kent. The correspondence is between a Mrs. Spencer and a Mrs. Small. I have spent many a night with those important letters spread out in front of me. How homesick I felt for England. What fascinating glimpses of lower middle-class life they afford. How Irene Spencer and Vera suffered for their families. Medals should be struck in their honour. Irene is a plain cook, and Vera an exotic, which says it all, perhaps. But despite these differences, a friendship grows and a relationship develops. These unknown women, sadly neither is now to be found at the same address, and the Salvation Army has drawn a blank. These bastions of English society have unknowingly presented us with an accurate social document. Clippings from the local press provide welcome background material. Thanks to Vera and Irene, future generations will be able to read this book and know what it was like to live in the late 1980s. Social historians wishing to know what a knitted thermal boob tube is will turn to this book in gratitude. The letters are indeed fascinating on matters domestic. The book is awash with household hints and recipes, but broad social issues are not neglected. Irene writes to Vera from Groshope police cells after her arrest for contravening the Public Order Act, and events take a dramatic turn when both ladies are subsequently imprisoned aboard HM prison ship Pride of Cleveland. But typically they manage to maintain their correspondence by the ingenious use of prison-issued toilet paper. Others are drawn into the correspondence. Vera's son, Howard, a somewhat regressive type, writes to his mother on organic brown rice paper, informing her that he is suffering from alopecia. Karen, Vera's daughter, is in permanent crisis, and Bruce, a Church of England clergyman, writes from the vicarage on both sides of a communion wafer. But it is Irene, released on the grounds of insanity, who battles for her friend Vera's freedom, organising a Vera Small's Innocent fork and finger buffet. These letters will appeal to anyone who is on a rota to arrange church flowers, those interested in penal reform, and students of family life. I found them to be quite compelling. Quite honestly, as I laid the last letter aside, I felt a better person for having glimpsed behind the net curtains of Mrs. Small and Mrs. Spencer's turbulent lives. 34 Wormwold Way, Heather Green, 14th of July. Dear Vera, thank you for your thank you letter of the 9th. Yes, it was a lovely day. I had a postcard from Leslie and Keith this morning from Lanzarote. Food superb, weather glorious, gorgeous hotel. I shall pop round to the new house tomorrow to order the milk and papers. It was kind of you to write a thank you note. So few people bother now. You'd be surprised, out of 100 guests and 35 others who were posted cake, how many just don't seem to think. I did enjoy your company at the reception, and I am much obliged for the loan of your handkerchief, laundered and returned enclosed. It seems a shame you live so far away, since we seem to share so many of the same interests. Perhaps we'll become pen pals instead. Must close as Sydney is howling for his tea. The house seems so empty now. I'm glad of his company. so he's getting a bit spoiled, I'm afraid. The secret of my tara masalata dip is that I mix the raw with cottage cheese and perhaps a few breadcrumbs, so that it is not too oily. It always proves popular at parties. Kind regards, Irene Spencer. The Gables, Little Potterton, 16th of July. Dear Irene, thank you so much for your note thanking me for my thank you letter. I quite agree that not enough people bother these days. Curtsy costs nothing, I always say, unless you count the cost of the stamp. Isn't it an awful price? I felt quite down when I returned home. I do love an occasion, and now my children are both so far away, I don't often get them. In fact, the last was Gerald's funeral. Still, I mustn't complain. You will miss Leslie at first, I am sure. She's a lovely girl and looked quite magical in her wedding gown. Ivory taffeta has always been my favourite. I was so glad when Princess Diana decided on it. Still, Keith seems a pleasant chap. I tried your tara masalata on the vicar's wife, and she said she's never tasted anything like it. Exchange is no robbery, so here is one of my standbys. Crumble a packet of digestive biscuits into a pan of bittersweet melted chocolate and butter. Mix well, turn into a flat pie dish and press well down. Pop into the freezer. Delicious as a tea time snack, or cut into squares as petit fours. Gerald always had a very sweet tooth. Well, I must close now, as it is time for a book at bedtime. It's the Boston Strangler this week. Do let's keep in touch. I love to get a letter in the morning. It makes the day, I feel. Of course, the children write when they can. All the best, Vera. 34 Wormwold Way, Heather Green, 21st of July. Dear Vera, your letter has thrown me into utter mental turmoil, and I haven't slept a wink since receiving it. I've not been able to settle to anything, and finally I thought, well, you'll just have to face her with it. So that's what I'm doing. After all, honesty is the best policy, and if in doubt, say you don't know. Now, I am going to say some things in total confidence, and I'll hope that it will go no further. I should hate everybody to think I was a fool, even if I am. It's so very embarrassing. I don't know how to put it. Of course, you know that I had 100 guests to invite. Well, Leslie and Keith wrote out a list, and Keith's parents, and I added mine to it, so I lost track a bit of who was who. Things are such a burden when you're on your own, as you of course know. There's so much to keep in your mind. Still, no excuses, fair's fair. The long and the short of it, I thought you were one of Keith's family when I met you. I wasn't until in your last letter you said, Leslie is a lovely girl, Keith seems a pleasant chap, that I had the inking of an idea that you weren't one of his aunties. I could have sworn that's what somebody said at the reception. Are you perhaps one of Leslie's old teachers? Or a friend from where she used to work? I know she had some coming. Please don't say you are one of my family, or I think I shall go quite mad. Perhaps I am already. I do forget people's names now I'm older, and I mislay things constantly. Proof of the pudding, I just made myself a cup of Ovaltine after that last sentence, and then I couldn't find my pen. I searched high and low. Finally, I found it behind my ear. I never put a pen behind my ear, I don't think. You see, I feel now that I can't be sure of anything anymore. I've really come to mistrust myself. This is how old ladies are supposed to go, isn't it? But I'm only 62. I dare hardly go to the shop anymore, in case I walk out and forget to pay like Lady Barnet used to. And look what happened to her. Now, I hope this won't spoil our friendship, because I did so enjoy your company. I've certainly not danced a tango like that in years. Before I was married, in fact. And this brings me to my second point. I do remember that we enjoyed a quantity of liquid libation, and in the heat of the moment, I might have broken the rule of a lifetime and uttered one or two confidences to you. I shan't say what they were in case I didn't. There are a couple of small things of a personal nature that I'd rather not tell the world and his wife, if you know what I mean. And if I did tell you, then please forget them. Oh dear, all this sounds very dramatic, doesn't it? I'm not usually an emotional person, I can assure you. Perhaps it's the shock of Leslie and Keith deciding to stay a week longer. I've had to go and cancel the milk and papers and turn everything off. And of course the newsagent look at me as if I were a perfect fool. If they'd come home as planned, I could have asked Leslie who you were. But then again, perhaps I wouldn't have. Children get so irritable when you forget things, don't they? Please forgive this outburst. I'm sure it's all simple misunderstanding. With sincerest good wishes, Irene. P.S. I've been too depressed to make up your recipe yet, but it sounds delicious. 30th of July. My dear Irene, sorry to have been a while answering your letter. The postman, silly fool, unfortunately delivered it to the wrong Gables, the one in Great Potterton, and Mrs. Wavertree was 2 days bringing it round. She finds it hard to get out with her arthritic knee. Then she delivered it when I was out, and the dog hid it in her basket. I discovered it partly chewed when I gave her blanket a good shake this morning. I was upset to think you have been on tenterhooks waiting for my answer. I do know what you mean about this absent-minded business. Only yesterday I set off to the shop for toilet paper and came back with a tin of cherry blossom and 20 cigarettes. I wouldn't mind, but I haven't smoked since I was 12. Sometimes I think I would forget my own name if it wasn't on a chain round my neck. Karen gave it to me for my last birthday, and I wonder if it wasn't a hint. To put your mind at rest, no, we have never met before, and I'm not really from either side. I'm an old friend of Betty, and as I was staying with her when she masterminded your catering, I thought I might as well give her a hand. The salmon mousse and the blue cheese quiche were mine. Betty and I used to do functions together before I moved. More a hobby than anything, really. I do recall having 1 or 2 sherries, but I have no memories at all of dancing the tango. Are you sure it was with me? Gerald always used to say I had 2 left feet, although I was considered quite a jitterbugger in my youth. As to any confidences, I can assure you they are quite safe with me. Betty says I passed out as soon as I got in the car, and the next morning I left as soon as I had drunk a black coffee. I would have liked to have lingered, but Mabel Thrush, my next-door neighbour, would only look after my dog until Sunday. It's nice to think that you felt you could confide in me, though, on so short an acquaintance. I've often longed for a friend to talk about personal matters. Men don't encourage intimacy, do they? I always felt rather a hysterical fool if I got emotional about anything with Gerald. How have you filled your extra week without Leslie and Keith? Pity I didn't know sooner, or you could have popped up here for a couple of days. Must stop now, as Mabel is at the door. I expect she's on the borrow again. Take care of yourself and steer clear of the sherry bottle. All the best, Vera.
Con il secondo estratto da A Lady of Letters, da Talking Heads di Alan Bennett, concluderemo la stagione di Lingue Originali per quanto riguarda la letteratura in lingua inglese. Io voglio ringraziare Marco Piovaz davvero di cuore, e tutti voi che ci avete seguiti e ci state seguendo ancora nell'ascolto di queste letture che tanto in lingua inglese, tanto in lingua tedesca, tanto in quella francese non sono esattamente semplici. Questa è una sperimentazione che noi abbiamo voluto realizzare qui a Caffè Italia e siamo contenti che abbiate apprezzato l'iniziativa. Ma saluti e ringraziamenti finali li faremo al termine della prossima puntata. Per oggi vi ricordo, sempre 3 sono gli episodi di Lingue Originali per settimana, in uscita il venerdì, il sabato e la domenica alle ore 22, con la letteratura nelle 3 lingue che vi ho detto, con Marco Piovaz, Nadia Meroni e Barbara Marchand. Da Dario Albertini grazie per l'ascolto, appuntamento al prossimo episodio di Lingue Originali su Caffè Italia.
Lingue Originali.